right, good evening, everyone. I was thinking what to talk about this evening, and I ended up with my, usual topic. However, what Marek just highlighted, that we are making some games which are profoundly inspired by the reality of our country. I think it would be nice to showcase this a bit. So let me talk today about creating Bohemian Game Worlds and use our most recent creation, Everon Island from Arma Reforger, as the example. My name is Ivan Buchta. I'm creative director of the Arma series, and I've been working at Bohemia for more than 17 years. I started as Flashpoint modder, and my passion for military gaming and terrains and environments brought me to Bohemia Interactive. Besides that, I just like games, nature, military history, and just recently, archery. Bohemia Interactive, the most Bohemian, hooray, and most Czech company, founded in 1999. Currently, we have 6 offices, one of them in Amsterdam, another one in Pattaya, Thailand. Very rich and diverse portfolio, which started with Father Frost, but soon continued with legendary Operation Flashpoint, Arma franchise, Daisy, bigger islands, currently ongoing projects. We have almost 400 employees, and we are driven by the 3 principles of curiosity, creativity, and community. And this pretty much applies also to building the Bohemian Game Worlds. There are some games which we make which use levels or heavily stylized environments. So I'll be mostly speaking about our approach to Arma series and naturally Daisy. For these games, environment is a cornerstone of everything. Depending on how we set up environment, it basically dictates how we use it, how we employ it, how we explore the setting, and from the world building perspective, we are after plausibility, depth, and inspiration to the rest of the team. From the world design perspective, we are chiefly going after authenticity and, let's say, some geographic possibility. We are driven by ambition to create something which is truly unusual and unique. We have accumulated know-how dating back to the early years of Bohemia Interactive, and as Mark mentioned, we have our proprietary technology. In short, when we tried to create Everon, we really wanted to transfer players to a plausible virtual terrain which is inspired by 1980s Czechoslovakia. The game is set in 1989. Detailed goals, well, you can ask me after the talk. Arma Reforger, which entered its public early access phase on 17th May last year, is powered by Infusion, currently released on PC and Xbox. It takes place on the fictional Everon Island, originally appearing in Operation Flashpoint, but it's set 4 years later from the events of Flashpoint 1989. You have US Army and Soviet Army, the usual culprits, fighting in huge multiplayer game modes over the control of the island. Again, we focus on the authenticity. And we are powered by Infusion. It's our proprietary game engine, which goal is to blend the qualities of the past Arma engines, the real virtuality, and Enforce engine created by the original team of Black Element Software, Filip Doksanski and the company. Sporting big worlds, supporting huge amount of entities, and allowing us for this stunning visual quality and detail. Gameplay of Arma Reforger is focusing chiefly on authentic combat of light units, infantry, and wheeled vehicles. We try to support the military roleplay, so also the non-combat activities, and we have 3 game modes. Conflict, the big one, fulfilling its PvP mission chiefly. Game Master, which is sort of a multiplayer session meets original Arma editor in the sandbox. And we have Capture and Hold PvP missions, which are small, utilizing particular location. Everon Island is 13 by 13 kilometers, reimagination of one of Operation Flashpoint words. Its geography is fictional but inspired by 1980s Czechoslovakia. It tries to depict a typical Central European landscape in the temperate forest biome with rural areas and just the small settlements. Well, before we started rebuilding, we first had to understand the original. So this is how it looked in 2001. This is Operation Flashpoint. Everon, as it was presented for the events of 1985, it used the terrain of Krk Island, Croatia, but heavily mutilated, if you ask me. It was Czech-speaking country, apparently, because the local partisans were speaking Czech. They were having Czech names, like Stojan Jakotic. Landscape architecture signage was obviously taken from the central Bohemia, very Czechoslovak. However, it came with French village names, which proved to be quite a problem when we tried to explain the background of the terrain in detail. It was heavily abstracted, and the community still knows it. There are still people playing or modding Flashpoint, and they know every nook and cranny of this terrain. So we had to be very careful with recreating it. So as you can see, this is the shape of Krk Island. However, it's like 36 kilometers, so it's basically 9 times bigger. And this is how it looks like in reality. So Mediterranean is okay. No internet. Can someone please get back to the presentation? Thank you very much. No problem. This is how it looked like in Operation Flashpoint, released in 2001. So obviously we aimed for something slightly better. Still, there were things worth preserving. You know, people were playing the story, so they know some locations, the setting, the factions. They were aware of the general geography and some landmarks like this Helfenburg Castle. So we delve into the setting research, looking at how the Czechoslovakia looked like in 1989, what the typography looked like, various products. You know, for example, people didn't have the mobile phones. They were still using booths and landline telephony. They were using alarm clocks. There were some really peculiar machines, like typewriters. And of course, we were researching this together with the military matters of the era. As you can see, we quite succeeded in creating these ancient interiors and exteriors quite successfully. And just a little glimpse on the kind of references we've used. So it's Třebíč in 1980s. But we've also visited some of the locations which inspired the original. So this is Helfenburg Castle in North Bohemia. When we started world building, we looked into the lore. We had some issues to cover. We had to map Everon's history, both the ancient one, explaining the layout of the terrain, and the recent one, explaining why war is happening there and under which circumstances. Well, there were 2 cardinal issues we've had. No civilian populace, because Arma Reforger still does not have civilians, so we had to fancy evacuation of civils prior to the hostilities commenced, and French toponyms in a Czech-speaking country. When I asked Marek, why did you use the French village names? It's like, oh, you know, I was studying French at the time and I kind of liked the sound. Well, thank you, Marek. So we had to come up with an elaborate legend of the influx of immigrants from Bohemia post the White Mountain and during the recatholization. So that's how Czech appeared on Everon and prevailed. Delving into history was not just pointless narrative design exercise. We really needed to explain the background, inspire environment team for the content. So, for example, we We're looking into how people are living there in the 17th, 18th century. So fishing, fighting pirates, herding sheep, or mining. So there are mining areas, and it permeated into toponyms. And of course, we had to explain the background for the conflict presented in the game. We started with the geography, with the very basics. Where is it placed on our version of the globe? So it's in the middle of Atlantic. We came up with the archipelago map, and we even devised the 1989 World Factbook entry for the Everon Socialist Republic. This is a yearbook published by CIA. It's also a public document and quite useful. It's a great geographical summary, including inhabitants, political parties, military, yada yada yada. And it soon became part of game documentation, and environment team used it quite extensively. Then we had to reimagine the geography of the terrain. In the Infusion engine, it was quite a pleasing task, as you can see. We started with high-level design, defining 3 major regions with a distinct style. The industrial north, the rural center, and the wild, mountainous, and quite attractive south. These concepts were made by Josef Suri. Then we looked into potential changes in the terrain. So here we identify the rocky areas, some sandy areas, and lake. We had to smooth the original terrain. The original resolution was 50 meters per cell. We went to 2, and we had to apply some erosion and other filters to make it plausible. This is one of the very early iterations. This is how it looked before in Operation Flashpoint. Speaking of the landscape, we tried to come up with something very convincing and highlight the regional differences, but maintain the same biome, same tree species. So we introduced forests, groves, alleys. There are some era-specific items like collective farms. In the socialist time in Czechoslovakia, these were built on the prominent places to show the success of the socialism. So we also tried to find some, let's say, obvious and dominant spots for these. We also focused on the plausible infrastructure, the level of roads or power plant. We have a power plant. The power plant is connected to the power lines of various voltage. And when we would have in-game electricity, no promises, basically our terrain data are ready for that. Speaking of the forests, Flashpoint used a very simple way of filling the forests using the square and triangular segments. Naturally, after all those years, we have vector-based layers defining various forests, so we were able to arrive to something very natural looking, and not just from the top, but also variety of the forests and clearings you would or you can appreciate as infantrymen. For this, just a short glimpse on the presentation of vegetation species by our colleague Honza Javůrek. Single species, Pinus sylvestris, usual forest pine in the glory of all its variants. This is how we build various sites, various types of forest. Some of the trees are better used in the woods, some are solitary. And we have similar sets for all the major species used there. So hornbeam, birch, Norway spruce. Next one. Speaking of architecture, we focused on the Czech or Czechoslovak village from 1970s to 1980s. And it's interesting that most of the structures, most of the houses in the game have a real counterpart. So if you're a Reforger diehard fan, you can actually browse Czech Republic and find those places. Besides housing, we also try to add some production facilities like sawmills and services like a pub or post office. With the settlements, we try to preserve the specific traits of the original villages from Flashpoint. We had to identify the capital, and we added one new village, literally Villeneuve, and a couple of small hamlets and farms because the original village layout felt quite empty. And we even used the consultations provided by a real-life urbanist, Konstantinos Dimopoulos. He's into level design as well. You may know his book, Virtual Cities. We started with concepts, identifying the key items of a Czechoslovak village. And here, just example of how we constructed Villanova. So this is basically green meadow and emptiness in Flashpoint. This is the concept based on some very rough agreement with the concept artist. The first iterations of the landscape using also white boxes and some very simple surfaces masked. And this is the final thing, including the local power exchange and properly executed fields and meadows. Same we did with San Philip, the capital of Everon. This was the original layout, which was, well, nothing special. Sorry, Ondro. Hello. So we started talking about the history of the place. Is it growing? How is it growing? How about the street plan when it was created? There are some services areas, housing areas, old harbor, new harbor, some additional industrial parts, and this is how it ended up. So we ended up with very convincing large town. Toponyms. Toponyms may seem like a gimmick, but they are very important. Players are actually using them in the game, and we are trying to keep this consistent. Naturally, we had to keep the original French names because people know it. Even the new settlements were named in French. However, other types like the mountains or streams were localized, so you can translate them to any other language. And we tried to invent all these based on the background. So we were even looking into how medieval settlements were developed. There is the naval tradition. There are lots of naval or maritime inspired toponyms. The economy, like for example, Millstone Creek. Yeah, there were some mills along the stream. And ultimately, when we were trying to name some of the most local and least important features, we simply asked ourselves, how would a local call it? And there are even some toponyms where we even used the names coined by our environment team. We reserved some space for the military, naturally. This is Arma Reforger is a military game, so we have military area and bases which are inspired by the Czechoslovak People's Army and Soviet bases, the area. We are providing plenty of navigation aids. Apparently, lots of our players lack the sense of navigation or simply have to learn about new places and kind of get used to it. I'm often comparing it to someone moving to a new place and knowing how to get around. Of course, the general morphology, the biggest hills, valleys serve as a great general pointers. We have landmarks as additional references, and of course, we are using signage, crossroad signs or village signs. So if you, even in the combat, if you have binocular and you are lost, you can figure out roughly where you are. And besides, coming in upcoming update, we have blazed trails, including a map where you also have the red dot for "you are here" sign. This is inspired by the Czech or Czechoslovak trailblazing system. And we really have the kilometers, we really have the map with the 4 colors used for the blazing. And yeah, you can pretty much walk along Everon and enjoy yourself, enjoy the sights, because ultimately trail or blaze trail will lead you to some cool places which are away from the road network. Besides this, we really wanted to add some genius lossy, some in-depth flavor art, providing something fictional but authentic, and something which would encourage exploration. We basically want to invite players to search for stuff. All right, first we started with the flag. The original one used by the rebels in Flashpoint was not entirely usable. So we developed a new one, which is also reflecting the French connection and the history of the land. Coat of arms inspired by the flag, simply ended up as the best. Although we were looking into French lilies or goats, the national animal of Everon. We have a couple of monuments, like monuments to heroes of 1985. Basically, Flashpoint guerrillas have 3 of their monuments on the island. Jan Neruda, who allegedly visited, and for those who don't know, Jan Neruda, famous Czech poet and journalist from 19th century. So he allegedly visited Everon. You can read the details here. And of course, some of the omnipresent memorials of the fallen. Brands and logos. We tried to come up with the plausible logos inspired by the era-specific beers. Cargo containers are also perfect opportunity to come up with some interesting graphics. There are local companies represented. We even created a font based on some hand-painted fonts from the past. Concrete mixing plant, or VD Almara, the furniture factory. So not, or unlike Arma 3, Arma Reforger has furniture. Fuel station and the distribution. So, by the way, the counters are in Tolar, the currency of Everon Socialist Republic. When your car gets broken, you can use Moto, everything for the cars. And after good day's work, I suppose particularly game developers appreciate hanging out in a progress bar. We also try to add the bulletin boards, which were typical for disseminating information in 1980s, because internet was just a matter of the U.S. military. So along with some propaganda, some hygiene reminders, you can read a lot of official leaflets and information. It greatly conveys mood of the era, and of course, we also try to test this as a potential narrative device. We even have a radio Everon. So when you meet this radio in the game, you can turn it on. We practically have 2 soundtracks. We have nice ambient soundtrack created by Dominik Svoboda, and we have another soundtrack, basically pop or electropop inspired 1980s like tunes created by various artists. So Everonský rozhlas, Everon Broadcasting, you can hear it in the game as well. Let me conclude my presentation by a couple of comparison shots. So Arma Cold War Assault or Operation Flashpoint versus Arma Reforger. So this is how a place called La Valette looks like in Flashpoint, and this is how it looks now in Reforger. Pinewood Lake, well, there's no lake here, but we created one in a place which was basically a place from which the water couldn't run away. So in this area of natural water accumulation, we ended up with this additional water body. More, before it was kind of dull place, which was turned to this awesome corner of Everon by our colleague Jan Čepera. Last but not least, the Montfort Castle, inspired by North Bohemian Helfenburg with Saint Pierre. So now you can see that the fidelity is very different, much higher. So to conclude my presentation, our unique approach really pays off because we are able to achieve unique results. Our work on the depth of the terrain and on its universal sandbox qualities lead to huge longevity of the products. Of course, we are very glad to have a very powerful and great engine we can modify to suit our needs. So there are some great things waiting, and of course, we are the best. I hope Slavic is somewhere around here so we can see it. All right, thank you for your attention. If you are interested in our work, hit bohemia.net or armaplatform.com. You can follow me on Twitter or X, I don't know. And you can also follow Arma Platform. If you have any questions, I don't know if you've run out of time or not, but if you have some questions now, let's do it. If you will have some questions later, I'm definitely available for some time now. So thank you again for your attention. Hope you had fun.
So thank you very much, Ivan. Are there any questions that you would love to ask Ivan? We got one question over there.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm curious, in the last year, with the hype of generative AI, including language or art, how is it currently shaping either your company or the game world in general? How do you think it will shape it in the future?
Well, of course. Well, usage of AI in our workflows, pipelines, and processes, right? We are doing some first careful steps. What I've just presented here, most of it is either too simple for AI or has to be done by humans. It's a very specific work. However, we are looking into how we could remove the chores from our shoulders. So that's where I see the potential of the AI usage in our company. And regarding the general trends, like I, I, I really like what one translator said in an interview about AI. AI currently still has no sense of humor. So there are definitely areas where it would be very suitable to use it. However, there are also areas where human brain, with all its development, history, background, and volume of experience, will be simply irreplaceable by any machine. Thank you. Any more questions, please? Yes, please.
So first of all, thanks a lot for the great presentation. It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much.
My question is a little bit technical. I just wanted to know if you can share some information. What kind of software you guys use for creating this beautiful landscape? Because obviously there was a huge leap in quality, you guys.
The landscape was formed and built in the World Builder, which is part of the Workbench, which comes as part of our Enfusion engine. So it looks like a state-of-the-art editing suites. Like, if you look at Unreal or Unity, it's basically using the same interfaces. We do this intentionally to make it easier for people to transition and get used to it. Of course, we use a lot more software. There are two gentlemen standing there, our lead artist and lead environment designer, Luboš Grok and Ondra Branžovský. They can provide a lot of technical information, but long story short, we use GIS, we use normal graphic software, state-of-the-art things to create all the graphical assets. And everything is put together and mastered in the Workbench. Thank you. So last question, please. There is no last question. Let's drink some. Oh, sorry. Please.
Is the text on the boards really readable?
Yes, it is.
I see it, and it's repetitive, or everything is original?
Everything is original, written by our narrative designers and myself. And there are even some Easter eggs. So I hope Michal Varnuška will be one of our programmers from Enfusion team will be pleased that he has his own camping place, Miva. I believe I believe this is some reminder that there will be a military exercise held on Everon. Basically, we try to put there something which would illustrate the situation of the war few months before World War commencing. There's like civil defense exercise, but there are a couple more, and you all are welcome to explore them in the game. You're welcome. So thanks for the questions, and thanks for the great opportunity to speak here on the Game Dev Pier. And Jakub, it's all yours now. Thank you.